Hello, thanks for joining us. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. Good evening. Thank you for joining the SEPTA Bus Revolution Community webinar. We're going to go ahead and get started. Tonight's meeting will cover proposed route changes in Northwest Philadelphia. My name is Bianca, and I'm a planner at Michael Baker International. We're supporting SEPTA on the bus revolution. We can go ahead to the first slide, Greg. All right, so we'll start off with a quick introduction before moving into some of the key themes of what we've heard throughout the project. Then we'll get into specific examples of proposed route changes and provide information on what to expect over the next year and how you can provide more feedback. We'll wrap the meeting up with a question and answer section where we'll answer your questions on the proposed route changes. Before moving into our presentation, we'll gather some information through polling questions to learn more about who's joined the webinar tonight. As we can see, routes 9 and 27 are the highest cited routes that people who've joined us tonight have most often traveled to. So first, we're going to launch a poll asking which types of bus revolution engagement activities have you participated in? Choose any that apply. If this is your first event, if you participate in public open houses, gone on the website, been on any webinars, let us know. This will help us figure out how we can better engage with people in the future. All right, thank you for providing some answers. So we can see that a lot of us have visited the website and joined some of these webinars before. And we'll ask another question. Sorry. Which parts of the SEPTA region do you most often travel to for work, school, etc.? Choose up to 2 areas. So if that's in North Philly, Northeast, Northwest, in any of the counties or other areas, let us know. Thanks for sharing. So yeah, we can see a lot of people obviously travel in Northwest since that's what we're covering tonight, and also in Center City. And so when we get into these question and answer section later on, you can be sure to ask us about any routes that cover any areas that you'd like more answers on. And finally, how did you first hear about the bus revolution? Thanks for sharing these answers. This is super helpful, everyone. We can see social media, email, and word of mouth are some pretty good ways to get the word out. Now I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Dan.
Thank you, Bianca. And thanks to all of you who have been participating in the project and come to events and talk about, to hear about the project. So before we get started, I do want to note that if you do have questions, put them in the Q&A. And that way, we'll know what people are thinking, and we'll get to as many questions as we can. But that's how you put in, that's how you ask questions. So before we get started, I do want to thank everyone. As many of you are probably aware, we spent last fall doing a lot of different public engagement events. We think we wound up having between in-person and virtual events close to about 50 or 60. We got a lot of feedback. We got thousands of comments. We went through all of them. We did try to organize them, and we spent a lot of time trying to address them. We do think there are some good changes that we proposed, but we also heard pretty clearly that there were things that we put in that initial draft that were not going to work for people. And so we tried to work through those and figure out ways to balance out what we're trying to do with this project, which is, again, trying to create new opportunities for people to use the system with what people come to expect out of SEPTA and out of their transit system. Next slide, please, Greg. We hear you. We know we have to do better. We know we have to communicate more. Next slide. And now I'm going to spend a few slides just kind of summarizing the general themes of that input and how we, or at least how we've, how we've interpreted it and how we've, how we've addressed it in this revised draft. So, like I said, we received thousands of comments, but there were some themes that arose in going through the comments. A lot of these themes had to do with transferring, a direct one-seat ride versus a trip that required a transfer. We definitely got a lot of feedback on routes being eliminated or segments of routes being eliminated. We got a lot of feedback about personal safety and security. We heard a lot about access to schools. And then we heard about the frequency of the proposed the initial draft versus the existing one, the weekend service, and the simplicity or the directness of the initial draft. Next slide, please. So most of the comments we got, honestly, were critical, which is, to be expected, and was fair. But we did receive a lot of feedback about elements of the network that people did like, even if ultimately they didn't agree with certain aspects of the, the route alignment. So 3 things that we went into when we went into this updated draft trying to keep were overall an increased frequency of service, routes coming 15 minutes or better, 7 days a week, some more simpler network overall, We want our system to be more reliable. We think this is why people have moved away from the system. So anything that we can do to increase service speed, increase service reliability are things that we are emphasizing. And then still emphasizing connectivity, using our transportation centers better, to create more opportunities for people to connect to different locations using the system. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go through some of these themes in a bit more detail now. So the majority of the comments that we heard had to do with transferring. We were looking to create a much wider range of frequent service, but to do that, we had to shorten routes and sort of reduce the number of direct connections. So that was the initial draft. And in this updated draft, we're reducing the number of trips that require that transfer. We're prioritizing one-seat rides for short trips and prioritizing trips with strong ridership. So, people use our system for a lot of different purposes, but but the average trip length is between 2 and 3 miles, 20 to 30 minutes. So we do understand that, pushing people to transfer on a short trip is extremely inconvenient. So we went through the initial draft and identified those transfers where, that was really a short trip somebody was making. We were basically forcing them to transfer for just a few blocks. And we looked at how many people were making that connection and whether or not it made sense. And oftentimes we did put back that one-seat connection. Next slide, please. So we heard a lot about school service. We've been talking with the school district during the project. Our scheduling group has a good relationship with them, but the way we approached the school service was not the best. We have met with the school district a couple different times to better understand their needs and concerns. Where we put back a lot of service that is more school related. Greg will talk about some of those routes in a minute. And then we've also adjusted schedules so that we're adding back service at key times to make sure there won't be overcrowding when students are traveling. Next slide. We heard a lot about personal safety, both in terms of asking people to transfer to the Broad Street or Market Frankfurt line, as that first draft was emphasizing, or just people standing on a corner in an area where they're not familiar with. So again, I think we're reducing the number of trips that require transferring, whether it's to high-speed service or whether to another bus. However, we do have a lot of people that transfer already, whether it's to the L or the Broad Street line or to a different bus route. So we are going to work with partners across the region to make improvements at bus stops, whether it's through amenities like shelters or improved lighting. And we're also going to continue the work on our SCOPE program, which is our strategy to address safety and security, and partnering with service agencies to work to try to help the vulnerable population in the system so that we can make everybody feel more comfortable, and everybody should be comfortable using the system. Next slide. We also heard a lot about the route numbers. If you remember, we adopted kind of this 3-digit placeholder system. We were always going to adopt a different system, but we kept the placeholder in there, the placeholder system in there for the last draft. People were very confused, staff were confused. So in this update, we've put back as much of the existing route numbers as we can. There are still some 3-digit numbers if there's a new route or a route that's pretty new compared to the existing one. And we're using that so that people have a reference for what is new or what has changed in the new system. We'll keep talking to riders about how we number and name our bus routes. We know there are going to be some number changes, but we also know that people rely on the familiarity. And so if a route isn't changing, potentially keeping that the same to avoid any confusion, that type of thing. Next slide, please. So before we get into the specifics of this updated draft, I just want to highlight a couple of key differences between what is the existing network and this updated draft. So there are still fewer bus routes overall, but there are a lot more routes in this updated draft than compared to the first draft. I think there's 11 more routes overall. To put all that service back, we did have to reduce the number of overall frequent routes as compared to that first draft. But there are still a lot more frequent routes in this version than the current system. We are still proposing on-demand service for some parts of our suburban service area, and we are still using the same number of service hours. So this is not a service reduction. We are not cutting service overall on a macro level, We are taking all of the service hours that we use on an annual basis and reallocating them. That is what this project is. So we are still maintaining that. We are also not shifting service hours between counties. The city of Philadelphia makes up the bulk of our service, about 90% of all of our service. So the 90% of the service is still in the city of Philadelphia. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to hand it off to Greg Strangeways, who's with the consultant team, who's going to go through some of the routes in Northwest. Please feel free to put questions into the chat. Try to get to as many as we can. If the questions are something that can be answered easily, I will try to address those in the chat, in the Q&A as well. Thank you very much. Take it away, Greg.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thanks for coming. So I will probably go through routes pretty quick, and we can go back to any of them, or as Dan mentioned, put your questions in the Q&A. We tried to pick out routes, that from that attendance list where people said they're using them, and also other ones of interest, for this Northwest Philly area. So Route 9, this was one we heard a lot about in the last draft, and essentially, the theme was that people really wanted the 9 to stay the way it is today. So that's what we've done in this draft. It's essentially the same as it is today. We were still able to get 15-minute or 30-minute service on Sundays, which is a lot better than the existing service. So there's an improvement there. Most of the other frequency is pretty similar. And then the only other thing is this is 5th and Market instead of 4th and Walnut, but this is, coming down Ridge Avenue, serving Wissahickon, getting on the expressway, using Walnut and Chestnut in Center City, same as the existing Route 9. And then just trying to find a little better location in downtown, in Center City, for the bus to begin and end the route. So essentially the same as it is today. Route 27, this was another one that, again, people really wanted it to stay pretty much the same as it is today. So we've done that. Matter of fact, it's probably, better in the sense that it'll be easier to understand. All the trips will go to Plymouth Meeting Mall. So Broad and Carpenter to Plymouth Meeting Mall, again, down Henry and using the expressway, and then over to Broad Street and down to Broad and Carpenter. So we did hear, as Dan kind of mentioned, people using this route for all kinds of things, including students at schools. Again, the Sunday service will be more frequent. That's a theme. It's just, a lot of existing services not very frequent on Sunday. But this is the existing path, and again, a little simpler because everything will go to Plymouth Meeting all the time. So for Route H, since there is a few routes that serve this area, the Germantown area, getting a connection at Wissahickon seemed important. So we still have Route XH, which we'll talk about in a minute, which will go to Broad and Erie and serve Green Street. But we did move this one from Green to Wayne Avenue in here. And then the routing it uses on the southern end to get to Wissahickon is what today is part of Route K. Also, this will be 15-minute service 7 days a week through most of the hours of the day. So this is a new frequent service compared to what's out there today. So Route XH, as just mentioned, this is exactly the same as it is today. So still serving Broad and Erie, still serving Green Street, the same, up to Cheltenham and Ogons. And this is also then much more frequency than exists today. So this is 15-minute service all day, 7 days a week for almost all the hours of the day. So there's Route 32 and 49A. So this is another thing. There's more of, in this new draft, more long and short patterns. So again, to get kind of more service where there's more ridership. But so on the southern end, they would always start in this 33rd and Dickinson area. The short version of this would only go up to North Philly, 33rd and Dauphin area. But every other trip, which is still every 30 minutes all day, 7 days a week, goes to Lyceum and Ridge, and following the 32 path that exists. So this is then when it gets to North Philly combined with Route 49. But this is the existing 32 path all the way to here. And then this will connect to University City, which is what the Route 49 does. So we think that's an important connection. There is then, because now Route 9 and Route 27, as we've talked about, are back to their existing alignments. Those serve Center City. So this seems like an important connection, but obviously, we want to continue to hear what you think about these ideas. So this is another route extension. So Route 65 today comes from 69th Street and up City Avenue and ends at Germantown and Chelton. And then this would extend it to Fern Rock, through Almy. It's just, there's no way to turn a bus around at Almy. So it will begin and end at Fern Rock on this end, but it will actually serve Almy Transportation Center on Almy Avenue there. So this is, it's a long route now, but it is, serving a lot between the 69th Street Transportation Center, Wissahickon, and Almy. So we think this again provides important connections. This would be a frequent route, 15 minutes again, all day, 7 days a week, 24-hour day service on this route. So Route 53, again, this is going to be a new frequent route. It's extended eastward to connect with the Market Frankfurt line at Erie Torresdale Station. On the western end here, going out Wayne Avenue, there is going to be the Route H there. That road didn't seem like it needed two routes on it, so we're, as proposed here, turning this one to go to Germantown and Chelton. And so again, this is more frequent and a longer route, and providing that connection to the Market Frankfurt line. So we think there's a lot of good here. There is obviously some changes as well. And so right here is where the portion that's today's Route 53 would still have service with the new Route H on Wayne Avenue then. This is, you've seen this in the last draft, I think, but a combination of the western part of Route 18 and then from Alny to Frankfurt Transportation Center on Route 8. So again, we think that's a good connection that people can use. A lot of people on the 18 now get on and off at Alny anyway. So this may, save people some transfers. This would be really frequent in peak periods, every 10 minutes or better. And then 15 minutes at other times. So this, high ridership, and we're expecting even more than today with this combination. So, very frequent service. It is streamlined a bit here from the 18 today, does a kind of bunch of turns in here. So this is trying to be more direct. If we do reduce the number of turns, bus can go a little faster, stay on time a little better. So this is Upsall and over to Easton. So it's still the same Cedarbrook Plaza origin, but a little more direct through here. Route L. So this is, it would only operate from Chestnut Hill Loop to Alny. To get to Plymouth Meeting, you would have to transfer at Chestnut Hill to the new Route 97 in our proposed network here. And this then would also be simplified. It would do the same thing on every trip, and this is actually today's express routing for Route L on Stenton and then 66th here and Old York Road. So again, to try to get the route more likely to be able to be on time, to travel a little faster, to be simpler to understand and use, and then to focus on this kind of higher ridership portion. So Route 97, would have less service, but would be the connection still to Plymouth Meeting Mall. Route 22, there was some people said they use this route. So this is showing the long version of this. There is a 22A is the long version, so all the way to Warminster, but there'll be twice that service, so 30-minute service between Willow Grove and Alny, and then at least every hour between Warminster and Alny. So every other trip will extend out here to Warminster. Route 61, very similar to today. It is extended a little bit on this end, the northwest end, to Ivy Ridge Station. And then a little bit simpler, we're again in Center City, just while we're doing all this, really thinking about where buses should travel and where they can begin and end their route and lay over for a few minutes. So this is using 12th and 13th Streets. So hopefully, again, a little bit more streamlined, a little bit easier. Before I go to the new route, I did just want to say one route that isn't here is Route 23 on Germantown Avenue. So we're just proposing no changes to the existing service. It is, as you probably know, one of the highest ridership routes in the system. It functions really well. It's, on a main artery already, Germantown Avenue all the way. So we're not showing it, but it's exactly as it is with the existing service for Route 23. This would be a new route from Chestnut Hill Loop all the way to Frankfurt Transportation Center. So along Cheltenham Avenue here and Adams Avenue. So again, we think, looking at travel patterns and everything, that this is something I think SEPTA has kind of thought about over the years, and seems like a good chance to implement this, and should be useful for a good number of people, we believe. So this just sums up some of, with this new network compared to the existing, some of the benefits of it. So again, we just don't want to forget why we're doing this. Like, change is always hard, but in the end, we want to make sure there's benefits for this. So there are, within a quarter-mile walk of frequent transit, so that's at least every 15 minutes or better. This is just kind of taking a snapshot weekdays at noon. But you can see there is a lot more people and a lot more jobs who would be close to frequent transit. So as Dan mentioned, we had to compromise a little bit and we heard all that feedback and wanted to get things, as close as possible to what people were asking for, and especially moving some things back to the way they are today. But still, a lot of benefits here. So these are the kind of trade-offs, we're always weighing. So this just breaks it down for people who might need transit even more than others. So benefits weekdays at noon, again, for low income, for minority, people with disabilities, for older adults. So again, groups we're just trying to keep an eye on and make sure that, again, it benefits everyone. And then, so we definitely do want to hear, this is still a draft. We've made some changes, obviously, based on the previous feedback, but, we want to hear again what people think about this draft. We've gotten feedback already during this round, and we'll continue to for a few more weeks. Just to run through, before we get to the questions, just the rest of our process here. So we're in the middle of, a lot of engagement here, things like we're doing tonight. But we also, heard from the last round just about the process, that, to make it as convenient as possible for people to give input many different ways and meet people where they are. So it's easier. The materials too, some people, had some trouble understanding. We've tried to, make them easy to understand what exactly is going on with this proposed new draft. On the website, there is now, you can look at the network. So there's a ways right at this is where you land if you go to SEPTA Bus Revolution. There is then different ways to look at the new network. The slider map compares existing and new. The remix map you can click on any route and get a lot more information. And then if you're just interested in a particular route, then here you can get information on a route, and then the changes from existing routes is here. And then this is by neighborhood. So there is one for Northwest Philly, and there's one for each area of the city and each suburban county. These webinars, so there's still a couple more of these. You can see Northeast, and then the suburban counties. The Project Bus is still out there. So this week, Willow Grove Mall in the afternoon, Broad and Oregon, in the afternoon. There's still some next week there. It's all on the website again, but just kind of highlight that. Other community meetings. So tomorrow, actually on Chelton Avenue there, Northwest Regional Library. And then another one on North Broad Street on Wednesday. Later this week, Thursday, this is at SEPTA's headquarters. And then for that one, a particular focus on school service, since again, a lot of people are interested in that. We just wanted to have one meeting where that's the emphasis. So this is, where we are. We had the previous draft, obviously a lot of changes here. We're, out now hearing about what people think about this draft. And we want to then, after this, during the summer, move to specific recommendations, start finalizing the network. There still will be one more round of engagement because there's hearings on the recommended bus network before it actually begins to be implemented, which would be next year, 2024. All right, I think that is it. And we can go to the questions. I don't know, Dan, if you want to start with these, or I should.
Yeah, I think Bianca, you're gonna read the questions for us.
Yeah, I can read some of these aloud. So we'll start with the first one that we got. The remix map hints of changes to Chestnut Hill rail service.
The person wrote devastating changes.
Sorry, devastating changes to Chestnut Hill rail service. If true, this cannot be isolated from the bus revolution. We use SEPTA as a whole.
Yeah, so I think reading between the lines a little bit, I think this person is talking about connections between buses and regional rail service. It's something that we've heard a little bit about before. There's not a ton of transferring going on between the two. There's very little actually, but a few people that we've spoken to in different neighborhoods in the Northwest have brought this up. So we're gonna look at it a little bit more to see where we're sort of just missing connections and where things need to maybe line up a little bit differently. But we are, ultimately the goal here is to create a more fully integrated system. We are looking at making some fare modifications to regional rail, which would make the connection between bus and regional rail potentially pretty powerful. So I think it's something that we, that we'll begin looking at as we begin revisions to this version of the draft. But thank you. That's a very good question.
And then there's also a related question of, does this process affect the regional rail at all?
No, so sorry, go ahead, Bianca, I apologize.
With just a similar comment about Chestnut Hill and wanting to understand.
Yeah, so
there.
Right, so there is a Reimagining Regional Rail project, which is looking at, which is is a slightly longer term project because a lot of the improvements that we would like to make on the regional rail end are capital, which take longer and cost more money. But we do ultimately want to integrate the systems to the maximum extent that we can. So, keep an eye out for that project, and we're always going to be looking for ways to have the two initiatives dovetail with each other.
We have a comment here. The L bus to Plymouth Meeting Mall can get crowded. I think there should be a direct route from Broad and only to Plymouth Meeting Mall.
Well, we are proposing, a connection, a transfer from the L to the 97. The vast majority of the ridership is between Olney and Chestnut Hill, so that's where we're trying to emphasize the frequency. But well, like Greg said, we are reevaluating the decisions that we've made, and we'll keep looking at that.
Our next comment is about the changes in general from the last proposal to this one. I'm so disappointed by fewer frequent routes. People who primarily use SEPTA to get around need to transfer, period. A one-seat ride is a privilege that can only be realistically enjoyed by those who use transit for only 1 or 2 trips, but have other means, like a car, to make longer trips. Eliminating frequent routes in this new draft in favor of more one-seat rides serves the loudest voices, who are those who have the means to pick and choose their transit use, but it leaves out frequent riders. People already ride the BSL and the MFL, and we can't design assumptions around the assumption that people won't use this. My hope would be to see a restoration of the plan for frequent routes in the next draft.
Yeah, so I think, I think we talk about trade-offs, and this was something that we had, we felt like, the initial draft really emphasized frequent service, but to make everything work frequently, we had to introduce a lot of transferring into the system to make it work. We have a fixed budget for this project. We can't run every route frequently. That's simply not possible. So, we are still providing a much higher level of frequent service than the current system does. Obviously, we want to look for different ways to provide that frequent service. So, I think we were all, I think we all wanted to put something out there that, would be as frequent as possible. But we felt like it was clear that some of the changes we were proposing, we had to kind of balance what our ideas were with what people come to expect, and the system that they use all the time.
We have a question about the 9 and the 27. What hours will these run?
Greg, do you want to take this one? I gotta pull it up. So the routes are going to run at schedules, on a span similar to what is currently run today, with higher levels of peak frequency, peak being 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then 3:30 to 6 p.m. But we'll be running, and then both routes will get more weekend service than they currently have today. But generally speaking, we'll be running from early in the morning until very late at night.
Yeah, so it is 5 a.m. to 1 a.m. on weekdays, same on Saturday, and then 6 a.m. to midnight on Sundays. That's Route 9. I'm pretty sure Route 27 is the same.
And another question about Route 9. Why not route the 9 along Market Street from 30th Street to 5th and Market? Much higher throughput, less likely to fall behind schedule due to double parked delivery vehicles.
So yeah, this was an idea that we talked about a lot. We think it makes some sense because the Route 9 is already very long, and anything that you can do to speed it up in Center City, it probably makes sense. I think one of the reasons we were hesitant was because the Market Street Bridge is going to go under construction soon. So that would require, we would put in the new routing, and then immediately it would go to detour for a period of time. We're a little hesitant to detour so many routes initially, but it is something that we're going to keep looking at. We are getting painted lanes on Market and JFK. So I think, there are going to be reasons to keep looking at the sort of how we run service in Center City to see if the streets make sense.
And then we have a question about the 23. Why can't the 23 be part of the trolley modernization plan?
So as you all probably know, being mostly from the Northwest, Route 23 was a trolley for a very long time. We are not looking at restoring it to trolley service at this time. Trolley modernization is really about replacing the current vehicles on the current routes with accessible vehicles, and we think it's going to be a pretty transformative project. Route 23 is a very high ridership route. I do want to note, though, that the trolleys in West Philadelphia do benefit from the tunnel, which moves things along at a much faster rate than running on surface do. Running trolleys in mixed traffic through Center City, I think would be a real challenge for us, and I'm not sure that the city would want that type of infrastructure in Center City with all of the other competing interests there. So I think it's something. I would say it's something that it will certainly not be the last time we're asked that question. But I do think that for now, I think trolley modernization is focused on the West Philly routes and on Girard Avenue.
We have a question about a specific location. What are you doing to make the bus waiting area at Broad and Erie safer? It's not senior citizen friendly.
So there is a big capital project right now looking at that intersection. It's a city-led project. But we are, going to benefit from, improved lighting, improved waiting areas, that type of thing. So, Broad and Erie is one of the busiest transit. I mean, it's a de facto transit center, even though there's no, it's a subway station, but with all the bus connections there, it's a de facto transit center. So we're optimistic there's going to be some improvements there that'll improve, service reliability and connectivity, but also improve the way. So I know there've been a lot of public meetings about that. But there's probably some information that folks can find online about that project.
We have a question. Will the K bus still run on Midville Avenue?
So Route K, we are proposing to combine part of Route K with part of Route H to create a connection between Cedar Brook down Mount Pleasant, and then down Midvale over to the new Wissahickon Transportation Center. So there will still be service on Midvale Avenue, but it's different. It'll be a bit different than today's Route K. Will be coming from the northeast.
Are you considering any changes to Route 23 that might increase reliability?
So Route 23 is, I think we're looking at, ways to increase reliability throughout the system. Route 23 is one of our highest ridership routes. So I think making sure it's reliable is paramount. But, the things that we're looking at are, we are looking at, stop rebalancing or stop consolidation as part of this project. We'll start talking more about that towards the end of the year. And we'll look at other things. We'll look at transitional priority. We'll look at other ways to improve speed and reliability. I think that we have a pretty active transit priority work partnership with the city of Philadelphia. And, I think we're looking forward to working on different projects, but a lot of those projects, like I said before about, reimagining regional rail, a lot of those projects are capital projects. So they require, the appropriate level of funding, but, and lead time and things like that. But it is something that we'll be looking at, both as part of this project and then going forward, as we try to get, this new bus network implemented.
We have a question. A big problem on the Route 9, we're told, is driver shortage. Will these new routes help the driver shortage problem?
Greg, since Greg is a consultant that works with transit agencies throughout the country, I think he can jump in on this in a minute. But I will say that, the operator shortage is something that we're obviously very cognizant of. It doesn't just affect Route 9, it affects the entire system. We are always looking at ways to make our system easier to operate and trying to identify ways to get new folks in the seat. But Greg, if there's anything you've sort of gleaned from other agencies, I think people might be interested in hearing about it.
Yeah, I just real quick, I would say the short answer is we hope so. That this operator shortage was even pre-COVID, and it was a national problem, and COVID really accelerated that or exacerbated the problem. So it is a problem for almost all transit agencies. But as part of this process, we've talked to operators all the time. That we call it in reach. We are trying to make the routes better and make the lives of operators while they're working better in terms of where the routes start and end. There would be bathroom facilities, trying to make schedules realistic, all things to make the job a bit better. And we're doing that with input from current operators. So we do hope that this new network would be better for the operators as well as their customers, and hopefully attract both then.
We have a suggestion here. I suggest you put real pressure on the city to only allow deliveries and pickups before a certain time, maybe 8:30 a.m. and after maybe 4:30 p.m. I've seen delivery trucks parked 3 deep in Broad Street holding all the traffic up, including the 27. Many European cities have strict regulations about delivery times.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good point. It's something that certainly we've talked about with our city partners. I think to make transit work effectively, I do think we're going to have to put some more strict rules in place so that buses can flow freely, so that traffic can flow freely, and so that people can get to where they need to go. We're very, we are aware, we do pay attention to what other places are doing in terms of smart loading and things like that. A lot of delivery companies build tickets into their cost model. They know they're going to get tickets. They know what they're doing isn't right. So I think we do have to kind of work with our partners at the city, the parking authority, to kind of identify ways in which, to free up the lanes that have been designated for transit use and keep things moving.
Has SEPTA considered promoting the bus to rail service? We had this before with discounted combination tickets.
So I think this is a really good idea. I think, like I said before, we're always looking for ways in which we can, integrate the system to the maximum extent possible. I think ultimately these types of fare medium are good. I do know that, as part of our newest fare proposal, we are looking at the potential of having sort of a pass that's both sort of a zone 1 and transit pass, so people could travel between the two things, and the transfer penalty, the transfers theoretically would the connections would be taken care of, but I think we're still a little ways off from there. But yeah, I think this is a good idea. I think we can definitely take this recommendation back and see if it has legs. But I think any ways in which we can create that connection is really where we are from a network planning perspective.
There's another question. Has SEPTA and the city considered opening a mini visitor SEPTA station at the new Wissahickon bus loop? It could provide information for those visiting the city and using the trails, Northwest Parks, Manayunk, East Falls, Germantown businesses, and historical sites.
So that's a really interesting idea and a good question. As a lot of you probably know, we are in the process. Hopefully we'll be starting construction soon. And I believe there is a webinar Thursday night about Wissahickon Transportation Center specifically. But I do think there is a plan to put some information there, whether it's manned all the time or not. I'm really not sure. But I think that's a really good question for the project managers who are making that presentation on Thursday evening. But I do think having, more, unlike, now with, Wissahickon, where there's really no information available except for the current schedules, I think if we, having a new facility, that will enable us to provide more information in a better way for people.
Can you comment on replacing the current aging buses?
So we are always bringing new buses into the fleet. I think, we're always retiring the old ones. I'm not sure if this question is in regards to, zero emission vehicles. That is something that we are, continuously looking at as we, as the different technologies develop and become a little more feasible for an agency of SEPTA size and operating environment. But yeah, we're always bringing new buses onto property and putting them out there and retiring the old ones. So thank you.
Are there any proposed changes to the R route?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, I think it would just go to Wissahickon all the time.
Yeah.
In the draft. Yeah, we didn't cover it in this session, but today's are splits some to Baker Center, some to Wissahickon. So the proposed network would have it
Right.
go to Wissahickon all the time. And then Baker Center would be served by the 56, I think.
Yeah, no, you're right. Thank you, Greg. And then there's going to be more frequent service down Midvale with the with the connection with the HK route. So yeah, but yeah, so that is a proposed change. We are proposing to send all the trips to Wissahickon.
Please keep sharing any questions if you have questions about specific routes, anything about the project. We've got a few more minutes left to answer these questions.
I think I saw a few more, Bianca, that I
Sure.
had missed. So one person asked, can more far side stops be incorporated into the system as part of this process? Yeah, so we're going to be looking at that pretty closely. Right now, our focus is on getting it from a process perspective, and Greg showed the sort of timeline of the project. But from a process perspective, our focus was really on getting the alignments first. We need to make sure that we have the right alignments and that, we have a balanced budget and all that stuff. And then we are going to start looking at all the stops. We have the closest stop spacing of any transit agency in the country. Part of that is the sort of operating context of Philly. But bus stops, when you stop as frequently as we do, it makes service slow. It also increases service unreliability because each trip varies in length, because one trip could stop at 100% of the stops and the next trip could stop at 50% of the stops, and we have a lot of stops, so that's a big difference. So we're going to be looking really closely at our stop spacing and our stop environments. That will include looking at some of the near side locations to see if maybe a far side location makes more sense. I think the issue with a far side location in Philly is that to make sure that the bus clears the intersection, you often have to stop it, 100 feet up the block, which requires removing potentially quite a bit of parking. Again, not opposed to that, but it is something that has to be worked through the appropriate channels. But it's something that we'll be looking at for sure.
There's a question, will Route 18 take you to the Chestnut Hill East train?
So I think we talked about this a little bit before. We did reroute the 18, and in doing so, we did miss some of those Chestnut Hill East connections, the one on Vernon Road specifically. So I think it's something that we'll look at a little bit more, as part of this project.
Is camera enforcement of bus lanes in Center City on the table?
So that is something that's being investigated. That would have to be enabled by the state, so that we can do that. But yeah, I think ultimately, that's the direction we'd like to go in. But that's something that would have to be dealt with at the state level. But it is something that we've certainly talked about with the city and would like to put it, has the potential of being put into action. A couple other questions I saw. Rick Holland asked, are there any plans to add passenger shelters? So the shelters are really the city is in charge of the shelter program through a relationship with an advertising company called Intersection. Intersection puts the shelters in and gets the revenue from the advertising on the shelter, and the city and SEPTA benefit from the infrastructure. In the last round of capital funding, SEPTA did identify some money that we've programmed in for bus stop improvements, which will look at shelters and things like that. So we'd like to add more. We'd love to be able to add shelters that had some aspect of real-time information. There are some interesting things that other cities are doing, Boston and Washington being two of them, with sort of e-ink readers, which are lower cost machines. They run on the same technology that like a Kindle does, and they're solar powered, and you can broadcast real-time information. So we're looking at a bunch of different types of improvements and things like that.
Here's a question. Did you ever consider stopping the 27 and the 9 at Wissahickon Transportation Center and making one bus route to Center City?
I mean, I think we considered a lot. I think we considered a lot of different things for Manayunk and Roxborough. I think there's a few different things that make them complicated. I think one is that with the 27, part of the complicating factor with the 27 is the amount of school service that's built into this trip, built into the schedule. This makes changing that route challenging from a resources perspective, because we would have to figure out ways to get all those kids to school without the route that they're using. And ultimately, it probably makes more sense just to use the one route, that one route to cover a lot of that school service, which it does, okay. I do think that the lower Northwest is a challenging area, but we did have 2 different proposals that went out last fall. Neither of them seemed to go over very well. But it obviously, as part of this redesign, we're making these changes. We'll implement a new bus network next year, but I think what we're committed to doing is really, making sure that we evaluate things holistically on an ongoing basis, every 5 years or so. We're not going to redesign the whole network every 5 years. That would be crazy, but we are going to start looking at things in a more holistic manner, which is different from the way we've approached service planning in the past. And we'll keep looking at different ways so that we can provide, higher levels of service throughout the system.
We have a question about Route 32/49. So routing 32 and 49 through Fairmount adds considerably to its length and makes it less direct for people coming from North Philly. Would it make more sense for people in Fairmount to take the L or trolleys to University City and then potentially route the 32/49 more direct?
So, this is something that we've gotten some feedback on throughout the process. I think, we like this idea. It does a few different things. I think one is that it does create a connection between, sort of the Manayunk Roxborough area through Fairmount into University City. Yeah, maybe it would make sense to transfer to trolleys, but that's sort of that's not really something that people are doing right now. And, maybe it's something with trolley modernization, will become, more common. But sorry, my dog's barking. But ultimately, we think this makes sense. There's already a lot of connections from Manayunk and Roxborough into Center City. There's already connections from Fairmount into Center City. And we thought sort of combining these routes to provide those new connections, both into University City from Fairmount, from Manayunk Roxborough, but also from from vice versa. We thought it made some sense. Hold on, I gotta mute for a second. Sorry about that, everybody. So I think, thank you all for, I think we can end there because my dog won't be quiet, but ultimately, like we said, this is still a draft. We're still making revisions. We've gotten a lot of feedback already. And we'll, continue to, review all of your feedback and make revisions as it makes sense to do so. Please go to septabusrevolution.com to check out our event calendar and, see, where we are, when we'll be there, and, keep reviewing materials, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions going forward. And thank you.